I I had a lot of notes about, like, just things that stood out to me in the reading and in the videos. Um, like, to what extent have I questioned or failed to question my own social conditioning, and there's a part about self-defeating and self-harming decision-making, like eating unhealthy foods, consuming alcohol in mass amount, stuff like that. But then I started thinking about successful egocentrism and was making all these notes about things that Dr. Elder was coming up with. She has the whole section about toys and how the difference between like a child and an adult and their egocentristic wants is that like a child can kind of get away with it, or they're not aware of it. Like, they know that they're doing it because they want it, but they don't know that that's bad. And so a child will take the toy and just say, "This is mine," and then they don't think about it again until someone else is like, "You can't just take stuff," whatever. But an adult does know that it's bad to just take something from another person. You can't, and to continue on her example, you can't pull someone out of the front seat of the car and be like, "Well, I'm going to sit shotgun because I want to." You have to come up with a way, like, "Oh, I see you're in shotgun. I'm so sorry. I just don't feel like whatever." All of those were really, I think, strong examples, but I kept going back, and this is, I guess, egocentric in nature, but what I saw in my life where egocentric thinking won. And this is what I'm talking, this is successful egocentrism, I think, in my personal life. And not just my personal life, and a lot of my friends I've seen, is weight. And specifically, like if I gave a personal example, would be how many times my family, particularly the men in my family, have made a point of saying that I mean, this is all very personalized, and I understand that, but it's happened to other friends too, which is why I think it's important, and I think it's a really interesting concept when we're talking about all of this. I'm talking about my weight because I am larger both in height and stock than a lot of women in my family, is that they weren't worried that I was still beautiful, but they were worried about my health. But none of these same people ever asked me, "What do you consume on a daily basis?" Or, "Do you ever work out?" Or, like, "What do you do for fun?" Like, there was never research done into who I was as a person before those statements were made. And when I was younger, it was very easy for me to be manipulated. And so in those situations, I guess I'm arguing that that's successful egocentrism, which is that the family members that were doing that, really what was going on is they didn't want me to be big because of the social conditioning to believe that, like, a small frame or a thin body was the right kind of body. And the part of us that knows that you can't say to a loved one, or really to anyone, "You're fat and you shouldn't because it's not attractive." And so instead of saying those things, they created like a medical response that actually wasn't founded on anything that I couldn't figure out until I was older. At which point I realized, like, oh, my brother heavily drinks alcohol and is a chef who uses butter in everything that he cooks. I am a vegan who does yoga every day. Like, these are all like just examples. I'm not like arguing for anything. I'm just saying, like, as I got older and started to realize it, and it's like that example with Max and Maxine in the book, which is the successful part of that egocentric manipulation was that it did work at one point, and I felt like I was doing something wrong, and I dieted, and I worked so hard to look like everybody else in my family, but their argument wasn't actually effective. And all of a sudden, one day, I realized they became an unsuccessful egocentric manipulation, because one day I realized, like, I eat healthier than you guys and I work out more than you guys. Your argument doesn't work. And it did create, and I would call them out, and it created these, not unhealthy, because I think they were warranted, but these issues, because now they had to, their egocentric nature had to come out. And I think, like, to be successful, to have successful egocentrism, it means that no one else can see that it's ego-driven. I think that's what makes it successful. And what makes it unsuccessful is the moment someone cuts through, and lack of better words, the bullshit. I mean, which is what I did, and which is when my family became unsuccessful. Anyway, that just really, like, while I was reading through all this and watching all those videos, I didn't see that right away, because I just kept trying to think of, like, personalizing it. Where do I see that? Where do I see that? And I think that that is huge, that I've seen in my life, and I've seen it in others. And I think if you look in pop culture right now, you're seeing a lot of that, which is like larger plus size models on the internet posting videos or pictures of themselves, and people commenting and saying, you know, you are promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, without knowing anything about these women, without knowing anything about what they eat, what they do physically. The idea is the unhealthy lifestyle is the body. It's not about who they are. Aside from that rant. Some other notes I just kind of made when reading that I really like. One of the notes was, the only time egocentric thinking is ethical is when it is working to get what it wants. Which, I mean, I literally write 7 times in my notes, like literally all politics. Like, that concept is political. I even wrote a note about, like, even Democrats whose sole purpose is party found, you know, like, it is their section. So it's hard to find, you know, I mean, I think we have a tendency to say that, like, conservatives are the most egocentric, because it's always, like, personalized. It's never about, like, everybody. How do we make everyone happy? And then we assume that, like, Democrats are the opposite of that. But that's not true. I mean, there's plenty of Democrats who, they want to be focused on their group, or, you know, where they're from, who their party line is. So even in that case, I think there's a lot of, like, self-serving, political, I guess, egocentric talking or manipulation. Yeah. And my last note I had made was, is successful egocentrism simply when you've convinced others to pursue your desires? And I think if I take it back to what I said, or my example with my family, is, if we look at that culturally, is successful egocentrism convincing women that diet culture isn't a sham? I mean, women buy into it, and they spend billions of dollars on an idea that might not be that true. I mean, I don't know.